It's really good to be here, a beautiful day in your beautiful city. I would like to explain to you, to start with, the 4 ways in which sound affects you all the time. You may not be aware of many of these because we're very used to suppressing sound, but there are 4 significant ways in which sound affects you. The first of those is physiological. That was quite gentle. A little shot of cortisol, your fight-flight hormone, might remind you of your alarm clock in the morning, which gives you that same jolt. Sound is affecting your hormone secretions all the time, and your breathing, and your heart rate. And even your brain waves are affected by sound through a process called entrainment. So if you get dropped in a nightclub with music at 140 beats per minute at 120 decibels, your heart rate immediately speeds up. Second way sound affects us all is psychological. Oh, I should say, by the way, if I play surf, which has got a cadence of around 12 beats per minute, your heart rate will slow right down again. That's around the same as a sleeping human being's breathing cycle, and so we associate surf. Is that microphone very toppy, or is it me? It is. Can you take a bit of the top off the microphone, please? Thank you. The second way sound affects us all is psychologically. This piece of music wasn't designed to make you feel happy. And it won't make you feel happy because that's not its intention. I could have put on a different piece which would make you feel more stimulated because music changes our moods all the time. Not just music, natural sound does that too. Birdsong, for example, makes most people feel secure at a deep level because we've learned over hundreds of thousands of years that when the birds are singing, we're safe. It's when the birds stop singing that we need to be worried. That means there's a predator around. The third way sound affects you is cognitively, how well you can think. You can't understand two people talking at the same time, or in this case, one person talking twice. You have bandwidth for around 1.6 people that you can understand, which means people who work in offices that sound like this and are trying to write a report, it has a devastating effect on productivity. If you have to work in an office like that, you can regain some of that productivity simply by wearing headphones and listening to birdsong or surf or some low-density sound. The final way sound affects us is behaviorally. If I were to play a sound like this for more than a few seconds, you would get pretty fed up. And if I left it on for 10 minutes, you'd be leaving the building. For people who can't get away from sound like that, it causes massive ill health. The European community reckons that this costs tens of billions of euros a year in lost days and in depressed property prices and in looking after people who are sick. And in fact, the startling statistic is that 1 in 4 Europeans lives in noise conditions which are well above the World Health Organization safe standard. You're lucky here in Amsterdam, so many bikes, so many canals, it's relatively quiet, but many cities are not so lucky. Our commercial behavior is significantly affected by sound. So not just whether you leave a place or stay in it, although that has an effect on what you buy, but also what we decide to do. Because economists, behavioral economists particularly, and psychologists are starting to understand now that we don't buy rationally. We're not rational beings. This is a common statement now coming out of the new economics in America and the new branding understanding. If I were to draw one of those graphs that marketing people love, with the vertical dimension from rational to irrational or emotional, and a horizontal dimension from conscious to non-conscious, if you look inside yourself the last time you bought anything significant, I suggest the vast majority of that decision took place down there. You may have walked out of the store and post-rationalized, oh, that was a good thing to buy. No, it was good. You have that little dialogue going on, but at the moment of purchase, it's not rational, it's emotional. So I want to look at how mobile sound plays into this environment where sound is affecting how we feel, how we are physically, and what we do all the time. Mobile sound is both a golden opportunity and it has some dangers. So I'm going to have a little color code going on here to make it easy to spot which one I'm talking about. First of all, of three things I'd really like to explore with you. The first opportunity is mobile advertising in audio. It's starting to become more and more prevalent. Every week seems to go by. There's an announcement about interstitials or some other form of audio advertising. There's a lot of danger inherent in this, as well as some potential revenue. The danger is because the world has changed. We've moved from broadcast to a conversation, one-to-one. We've moved from mass media into a personal communication where people expect to be acknowledged as individuals. Media have been replaced as contexts for conversation. Brands can't sell simply anymore. It's not about selling, it's about adding value. A brand promise has got to be backed up by brand experience which is consistent. Otherwise, in 5 minutes, it's all over Facebook that you're lying. Brands no longer control the conversation. The conversation is in the crowd. Peer review and the kind of network that we're all part of means that the truth will out very, very quickly. And we move from rational to emotional. Overall, all that means is that the old model of intrusion and clever copy overcoming people's reluctance to be talked to has been replaced by a whole new world where we're into asking people's permission and getting their engagement through a process of giving them value and understanding who they really are. That means if we're considering audio on mobile particularly, I'm turning the old phrase caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. In this scenario, let the seller beware. I don't know about you, but I get seriously pissed off with spam text. Spam audio on my personal mobile is going to be 50 times worse than that. So there's a major, major risk of upsetting people with this kind of communication. It has to be taken very carefully. There are opportunities, though. Brands can establish voices for themselves, where we start to relate to a brand as a voice that we know, as a personality. Some brands are quite good at doing this. Others haven't thought about it at all. It's an area where you, as an industry, can start to engage brands and help them to come on and speak with a consistent voice that we recognize. As well as that, there's a whole new sector which we're very excited about at the Sound Agency. We call it branded audio. Used to look like this. You're all familiar with these organizations which have made far more money out of being a record label than out of being a bar or a hotel. Well, that now looks like this. So brands like Nike are adding value with podcasts.
This is Alberto Salazar, your Nike running coach. This 30-minute workout includes hill repeats to
like
improve
this,
your running fitness
where
and
they're
leg
adding
strength,
value
so
to the
it will feel
product
easier to run hills,
and giving
distance,
people
and
the
increase
opportunity
mileage.
to use their product more intensively and more appropriately and better by giving them running coaches on their personal iPods. That's on brand, it's effective, it's adding value. And we're particularly excited about the arrival of a service in the UK, which you may have come across yourselves, called AudioBoo. This is the democratization of radio, and we're looking to use that with major brands who have talented individuals working for them with huge knowledge about areas of the market, and we're going to let all of them start booing. An AudioBoo is a short blog in sound. So, for instance, the buyer for women's wear at a major department store can make a boo every week about what's new on the market. Adding value, absolutely. Giving the brand personality, absolutely. Connecting customers with the brand and giving lots of extra communication. And then we've got to consider the fact that telephone sound generally is awful. Not only is the quality poor, I can't wait, I'm sure you're all the same, I can't wait for high-definition telephone sound to arrive. We lose so many nuances in voice through the restricted bandwidth. But also, the way that companies use the telephone is shocking. Bad on-hold sound. Then we get through to something which is asking us to press 1 for this, 3 for that, 5 for this, none of which are the thing that we want. How many of those conversations end up with a phone slammed down in anger? If we do get through, it's probably to a call center 7,000 miles away, Not so long ago, I called up the train line in London to ask about a particular route across London, and I got put through to somebody in a call center in the Philippines. That is not sensible. I mean, she did her best, but she has no idea about London's transport system. So we have to be very careful to improve the way that we're delivering sound through a mobile device. People get upset far faster through their ears than through their eyes, because sound goes into the limbic part of your brain, not the cortex. It's not interpreted in the same way as vision. Let's just give you 4 golden rules if you're going to indulge in audio advertising or audio communication of this kind. First of all, please make it optional. Let people not have it. Offer it to people. Secondly, make it appropriate. Always appropriate to the brand and to the person. Really consider that appropriate before you start to bombard people with sound. Third, make it valuable. Only give somebody an audio it's giving them some value. And finally, test and test and test. This is complex, and it's hard to understand the effects before you start. So for goodness sake, use panels and research before you even go out there. The second major opportunity for mobile sound is voice interface. I am so excited about this. We've been working recently with a very major handset manufacturer on exactly this area, on the voice that's going to talk to you from the handset, which will be their brand voice. I have no doubt at all that the mobile device will be the intermediary for the conversations we're going to have with our cars, fridges, cookers, houses, as well as, of course, all the people we know. In that scenario, voice is such a brilliant interface because it's all of these things. And it's so much more efficient for me to talk than it is to stop and have to use these and these to type and communicate via a keyboard. It's the most natural form of communication we have. It was around far, far, far before we invented writing. But there are some dangers associated with this area as well. I shudder to think how boring the world will be if all of these devices end up having a HAL 9000 type voice, because the manufacturers can't be bothered or don't understand the importance of delivering personality in each of these devices. And then, of course, if we're delivering personality, we have to be very careful it's not an irritating and really mind-numbingly frustrating personality. And at the worst, we would go all the way to the ringtone scenario where everybody's car and fridge has some sort of fake personality, fake famous person, George Clooney coming out of your cooker, whatever it might be. That would be a world I don't want to live in, a cacophony of awful sound. So there's a lot to get right in this area. The third and the most important area I want to cover with you is connection. Because it is possible to conceive of the mobile industry as bringing everybody together, but this is not connected. And this is a text message which is sent a lot in the UK. I don't know about in Holland. It's all too common. That's not connection. What it comes down to is listening. We spend up to 60% of our communication time listening. In any research, people will say listening is the most important communication skill. And yet, we only receive 1 word in 4 on average. Not this talk, not you, I'm not talking about you, but on average, we lose 3/4 of what people say to us. We're not very good at listening. I'll give you a definition of listening, which is a bit broader than just talking about communication with other people. I suggest listening is making meaning from sound. And it's one of the most important activities that you as human beings undertake. Sound is a universal language. This is the world's most unpleasant sound, according to research. We're genetically programmed to do something about that, and we all know how good it is to sit on an aeroplane next to that for 7 hours. I'll give you an antidote to that, actually. Here's a rather more cheerful baby. You couldn't hear his little in-breath, but that always makes me smile. It's very beautiful. And we extract meaning from sound in any scenario, whether it be a supermarket that sounds like this, and all too many of them do, or a beautiful lake, which might sound a little bit more like this. These are sounds that do something to us. All sound has these effects. The trouble is, as Hemingway says, most people don't listen. Most of us don't listen. That's because partly we invented a recording device, originally writing, and now you can go to sleep right now because this is being videoed, and you can watch it on YouTube or on the momoams website later on. The premium on listening intently has gone. In the old days, if you missed it, you missed it. Now that's not true. But secondly, there's a sort of cultural change that's taken place. If you think of the old Chinese model of yin and yang, where yang is outward going, male energy, heat, light, sun, and so forth, and yin is female receiving, its darkness, moon, and so forth. If I replace those two words with sound words, I think you might agree with me that we are much more fond of telling than we are of listening. That means we create a world that looks like this and sounds like this. With that much noise going on, it's hardly surprising people take refuge in this. Many people do, especially in the UK on public transport. There are some dangers associated with that. The first one of those is this: noise-induced hearing loss. 1 in 6 American teenagers has got damaged hearing as a result of headphone abuse. That's a really frightening statistic. Secondly, we have a phenomenon which I can't prove is divisive, but I think it's strange. Schizophrenia is the dislocate between what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. And if I walk around with headphones in the whole time, that dislocate is going on all the time. I sometimes think there's something a bit weird about train carriages where there's jolly conversation going on, none of it with the people in the train. It's a weird sort of party atmosphere, which is all with people somewhere else. Schizophrenia. And then we're turning large public spaces, might be a square, might be a train, might be a church like this, into millions of tiny little personal sound bubbles. This personal soundscape, this fragmentation of the public sound, means that we're not listening to each other anymore. We're in our own bubble. I suggest we are actually losing our listening for other people. And this is important because another definition of listening, and an even more significant one probably, is that it's the doorway to understanding. A world without listening, a world of noise and personal sound bubbles, is a world which is losing the ability to understand, and without understanding, that's the way to prejudice, dehumanization, violence, war. You know where that goes. I don't want to live in a world like that. So the opportunity to connect is there, but we have to be very careful to take responsibility for some of the downsides of the devices. I live to listen, it's my job, but I suggest we all need to listen to live fully. 2? Okay, I said to live fully and to be connected to each other. So there's some stuff that we need to do. We need to teach our children how to listen. I'm going to give you one very simple acronym and then just a few suggestions for things that you, and I mean you as the mobile industry, so I'm assuming that's a fair way to talk to you, can do. The acronym is RASA, the Sanskrit word for juice. And in the sense of listening, and this is a simple thing to teach your children, and that we could all teach in schools, receive, appreciate, summarize, ask. Receive means look at the person. Appreciate means little noises like, oh. Summarize, the word so, very important in listening. So what you're saying is, and then ask questions. It's simple to remember, and it will make all of us much better listeners. So what can you do as an industry? Well, in ascending order of importance, first, you can champion value advertising. That is to say, don't jump on people, always offer value first. Value advertising will work in audio. Secondly, you can help brands to find their voice. And an individual, unique voice that we start to get to know. That's an exciting prospect. Thirdly, and this is where I think we need to engage with the education sector, a huge opportunity for the mobile industry to get involved in sponsoring and taking responsibility. Let's get training children and training people in how to use their voices, in the dangers of headphone abuse particularly. The mobile industry is selling most of the bad headphones out there in the world at the moment. That's got consequences if people abuse them. So let's teach children about healthy hearing, and let's, in all schools, teach people how to listen. It's the way to connect to the physical, the metaphysical, and most of all, to each other. Thank you very much for listening to me today. Thank you.
Julian, thank you very much. So maybe it's nice to ask the audience if they are listeners or tellers. So who's a teller in the audience? You see, they are all listeners. There's only one. So you had a very good listener. So can you tell me something about how the listening is changed since the digital age? So since 1980 or so? So
well,
the way we listen?
I think headphones are the biggest impact on that, definitely. I mean, I could talk, and I'm happy to answer questions later about digital sound, digital music. I didn't mention music at all, and I can rant about music for a long time, because I'm a musician and I love it. And I regret some of the ways it's being used at the moment. But I think the use of headphones has changed our listening radically. I don't know about you, but I find it difficult, for example, to read a book and listen to music at the same time, because I come from a generation that used to look at an album cover in a darkened room and listen. And music I find immensely distracting. So I can't do those two things at the same time. My son has no problem with that. So there's a fragmentation of interest. The children are now happy with 2, even 3 or 4 inputs going at the same time. And that's a sort of low level of listening to any one of them. So I think the ability to be present is much more of a challenge now than it used to be. That would be the biggest difference, I think, since the digital age has come along. We are exposed to a tidal wave of content. There's almost a paranoia about missing out if we're not engaged the whole time, tweeting and looking at people's blogs and emailing and connected. Where's the silence? And where's the connection with ourselves?
Who has a question? Is there a question? I have a question. So you said it's interesting to brand, to have the brand to find your voice. What kind of voice do you think Momo need to have? Can you give an example for that?
Well, that's an interesting question. Young. Momo Amsterdam, you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I want to see a brand and then I say Shell, for example. So what kind of thoughts do you have when you say there's a brand and that needed a voice? So I would like to know how you think and how you feel that way.
Well, from my experience so far of momoams, it would be a young male Dutch voice, very intelligent, very lively, very engaging, very interested in everything that's going on around, personable, easy to communicate with, a lot like Mark, actually. Very often, the people involved in forming an organization form its voice. I showed you a picture of Branson. When the first time I got on a Virgin Atlantic airplane many years ago, the stewardess said to me, "Hello, sexy," which is the only time anybody's ever said that to me. I don't think she was trained to say that. I think she just understood the Virgin brand, because that's completely on brand, isn't it? Virgin, cheeky, irreverent, a bit different. So that's the way to express a brand voice, is in every conversation. The important thing is consistency. So you don't have one person answering the phone like this on an organization, and the next person completely like this. That's not a brand. You don't want to have robots, you just want to have everybody understanding, what is this brand?
Okay. One question over
I should
here.
say I have a small present to give
Great.
to the last person who asks a question. The last person who asks a question.
But here's Max.
The last. I'll make it a very long question, so I'm sure to win the book. No, I don't have a question coming up.
Okay. So what is your personal voice?
Inquisitive, I would say. You kind of summarized it nicely.
Great. You have a question?
Nice.
Do anyone? The last question, you get a book. Oh yeah, Steven is. Let me go that way. Yeah, you can go.
A book and a CD as well.
Hi. Do you agree that television viewing has become mostly also an auditory ambush? And do you see any possible developments in that television could be something much more agreeable to listen to?
Are you talking about the boosting of the volume level in the commercial breaks, or are you talking about just the general noise of television?
Well, also that, but more the general kind of atmosphere that you get when you watch television. It's just in your face, you know. It's
Yeah, I think there are two things that also are quite dangerous for our listening. The first is we're becoming quite short of patience. So we don't want oratory anymore, we want sound bites. And most people, or many people, don't watch programs all the way through anymore. They channel hop. Just like we don't listen to albums anymore, we listen to tracks. And we don't want to have conversations, we want to tweet. So there is a shortening of our attention span all the way down. And at the same time, you're absolutely right. I think the media have to shout at us louder and louder to get through because of the background noise of our civilization. So unless we see the word shock or exposed or scandal, we hardly bother. So it's much harder for people now to hear the quiet. There's very little, the phenomenon of 90 channels, nothing on. And many of those channels are just bombarding us with shouting.
Yep. Okay, the last question.
Very short.
The last question, very short.
How do you sort and tag sound?
How do you?
Sort and tag sound. That's the problem I have with Audioboo.
How do you tax it?
No, sort and tag it.
Tag it. Okay, Audioboo does allow tagging, which is good, and I'm a fan of tagging. So when I boo, I personally tag everything very carefully. And tagging is a big key, I think, for the future. But you're going to hear very shortly from a master of sorting and tagging. And I think that kind of algorithm, and we've been talking about applying it to other things than pop music, but that kind of algorithm has got a huge amount to give to the future. Because the most important role in this tidal wave of content is trusted guide. And you've just heard a wonderful service which helps us to find, through all the trusted guides who are blogging, the ones who are going to help us. Those two things combined, I think, give you a big answer.
Okay, then we have an official moment because you won a book and a CD.
There we go.
So there you go, it's for you.
Thank
Thank
you
you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian.